He's coming today from the UK to the world. His name is Peter Evans. And Peter, please do join us with your camera. Peter is the Director of Lean Continuous Improvement at Lego. He joined Lego in 2016, continuing a long career in change leadership, continuous improvement, operational excellence with great businesses, including GE Capital, Vodafone, Virgin Media, and Merck's Line. He lives in Mid Wales in the UK and usually spends his life traveling between various Lego locations. So very excited to have you with us, Peter. I mean, you have tremendous expertise and knowledge in enterprise architecture and beyond when it comes to company strategy, processes, and culture. So thanks for joining us. Look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Jose. Let me just make sure I'm sharing okay. Hopefully you can all see my presentation and hear me well. It's an amazing
Peter,
opportunity to
there we go. You
join this. You got it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Amazing opportunity to join this and speak to you, and I hope you find it of interest. I have to admit to not being an expert in enterprise architecture, but I think I know how businesses run, and I think I know how they're organized and how they work. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you a bit about today. And as I say, I hope you find this interesting and some fun along the way. So what am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk a little bit about Lego, just a very small amount on that. I will come back to it a bit later on, but also how it can feel dealing with enterprise architects. And I do intend to have a little bit of fun here. So please bear with me and don't get too annoyed with me if you are an enterprise architect. And but maybe you recognize some of these things I talk of, and then go into a bit of around system thinking, which is something that really deeply interests me and is part of the way I think about how great organizations worked, and then connecting it all with an operational excellence journey and the language of the business, which is again something I deeply believe in, and the ability to tell stories and to bring people with us on our journey. And then of course we'll follow up with some Q&A, and as I say, I hope you enjoy the journey, and I look forward to it. So Lego, our mission is to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow. This is a mission that we all deeply believe in Lego. I'm sure many of you have heard the stories of NASA and the apocryphal stories of JFK asking the janitor what he was there to do, and he said it was to put a man on the moon. Well, if you did something similar in Lego, then the answer you would get is around this, and inspiring and developing the builders of tomorrow. And it's one of the reasons why Lego as a brand and as a company is so successful, is how connected we are. And that's going to be a big theme for this presentation today. So a couple of little fun facts before we really get going. If you take 6 2x4 Lego bricks of the same color, there are 915 million different ways to put those bricks together. That gives you some sense to the limitless creativity and innovation that this very simple Lego brick brings to the world, and why, particularly in the hands of children, of course, who are probably some of the few people capable of finding all 915 million different ways, then it's a very important part. We also joke in my world in business services at the moment that we've got just about as many ways of screwing up a payables invoice, but that's perhaps not quite so entertaining. The other little piece which I love to share is that we are the world's largest tire manufacturer, 700 million plus tires every year. Of course, we wouldn't claim at all that they're anything like as complex as a road tire, but just a little fun fact to share with you. So let's get into the main body of this. What's it like dealing with enterprise architecture? Well, I guess in its worst case, I should say, by the way, that this is not my experience at Lego and the Lego Group, but in its worst case, it can be viewed as a complete black hole. We know that things go in there because we put them there, but we're not sure what comes out the other end. We know that a lot of money goes in there, but we're not quite sure how that turns into anything. And it's almost impenetrable. And that, for many people, and particularly in businesses that aren't that well connected, where enterprise architects tend to live apart somewhere, you can tell them they're all called Dave and they all go to lunch together, that you can't quite get to what's going on. But if you do get through the black hole, and if you do manage it through there, then you hit something dark and sinister. And that dark and sinister thing, of course, is the Death Star. And so, because you know that your ideas are going to die, that it's going to be long and painful, and that you're not going to really enjoy it very much. And even if you manage to break the outer layer and get further, you get to the office door, which of course has a stop do not enter sign and a fairly well-muscled bodyguard looking after it. And you with trepidation, you finally get inside, and you finally get there, and you're faced with this. And we know you all love it. We know that you spend your time drawing these boxes and doing this stuff. In my world, in the business process world, then I have similar things there, but it's over complex. It's in a language that only you guys understand, and it doesn't really speak to the business. And this happens a lot, not just in enterprise architecture, but in a whole range of different worlds. In my days in telecoms, as an example, there was the much loved ETOM model, and ETOM had thousands and thousands of boxes, and nobody actually in the business, other than the few nerdy geeks who like that sort of stuff, talk in that way. And therefore, we're already distracted and we're already taken away because we can't find ourselves in there and we can't recognize anything. And it certainly doesn't mention customer, by the way, because who are they? I mean, all they do is pay the bills, right? And I guess even if you manage it through there and you find out where you really exist, you then hit the inevitable Gantt chart and the inevitable project map and all of those other things. And if you're really lucky, Dave will tell you can have it, but it's not in the plan until 2031. Now, that's a pretty dark, of course, and a light-hearted version of the truth. But in many ways, that's what it can feel like, and particularly in businesses which have very strong divisions, which really exist to maintain themselves, almost like dark styles in themselves, then the connectivity isn't there, the language of cooperation isn't there, and in fact, it all becomes a massive chore to get anything done. And all you end up doing is kind of, at best, steering clear, and at worst, hating people for it. And it's not a very healthy place to be. Now, of course, it doesn't have to be like that. Things can be considerably brighter. The world can be considerably brighter, and we can have much more fun. And actually, in the best of worlds, then what you need is a Yoda there saying, welcome you are, because that's exactly what the way the world should be. And in fact, the more that we get that piece of it right, the more the interaction works, the easier it is for businesses to perform and outperform other businesses. And one of the main reasons, I think, why Lego is so incredible as a business is not, I say just, it has an awesome project, of course, a product, of course it does, but it's also incredibly well connected. It talks to each other on a very regular basis. We talk across the areas and the teams. We learn from each other, and that's how real change happens. And when I say a connected business, it starts very much from the family. As you probably know, we are a family-owned business. We remain a family-owned business based out of Billund in Denmark. And that family started the business in 1932 and have been at the helm of it all the way through. Now, changes have happened, of course they have, over time, but one of the things we do is we keep very true to our beliefs. So you can see on this chart the Lego brand framework, and it's the first thing as a Lego employee you learn and you get comfortable with. As I say, I told you the mission a little bit earlier, but the idea of system in play, the values of imagination, creativity, fun, learning, care, and quality, and our promises. And when I say promise, what I don't mean is in the same way as somebody says, well, I promise I'll come to your party, which probably means they're not going to arrive. These are the things we work very, very hard to deliver on, including in my world, for instance, in the partner promise, that includes paying our vendors on time, for example. We don't get it right all the time, of course we don't. And things go wrong, of course they do, but we strive all the time against that. And we measure ourselves against some very lofty goals with a spirit which says only the best is good enough. And because of that, we are completely connected as a business. And because of that, as I said, if you cut us, you'll find a Lego brick. If you cut us, you'll find people talking about the mission and the vision. And we're very clear about it, and we're very connected to that. By being connected to that, we can deliver. And that includes in all of our working areas. Just a little insight in terms of how strategy gets deployed in our business. And so no fancy words like Hoshin Kanri or any of those sort of things, but it's quite simple really, about particularly as we went through some changes a year and a half or so ago. We started early in the year with the owner family telling us about their vision and their picture for the future. And that was very quickly followed by our leader, our CEO, Niels B, talking to us about how that translated down to the Lego Group and our piece of the business. That's followed by our board director talking to everybody in his area, translating down from the original version from the family. And then, of course, our local leads doing the same thing. And that meant that in a very short period of time, every single employee in the business had heard the same story 4 or 5 times before we even start to build our transformation improvement plans. And it means that we are so locked together then and locked in step that it gives us some great opportunities to constantly gauge whether we're doing the right thing and constantly gauge whether we're pointed in the right direction. And surprise, surprise, we're a business that is succeeding pretty well right now. And that becomes us no shock when you know that all the way down to the lowest staff levels in the business, people understand the big picture. They understand how we're all measured, because we're all measured in the same way, and they understand how we perform to improve. So a massively important part of what we do. One of the things that I talk a lot about with people is systems thinking. And of course, some of you may be very, very comfortable with this as a concept. Some of you may be new to. This is not IT thinking. This is about the whole holistic approach of a business. And the important thing here is that it focuses on all of the constituent parts and how they work together, and how systems work over time and within the context of larger systems. And you can see on this slide some words around key concepts of the reinforcing and balancing of processes, the attention to feedback, the behavior over time, what is happening, what's changing, how is it changing, why is it changing, causal loop diagrams so that we understand the relationship between the system elements. So what drives what and how does it all work? And the management flight simulator, which is the effect of the management decisions. So in a connected business, what you don't have, which I know through my own experience in other businesses, sometimes I equate boards as a bit like parents at a soccer match, at a football match. They stand at the sidelines and they shout for their kids to run faster or jump higher, it doesn't actually help anything. It makes them feel better, but it doesn't actually help. You'll hear it today in business with people saying we need to be agile. But what does that mean? Well, for some people, that's a godsend, right? Because they're agile specialists and they can go off and do their project stuff. For others, it means quick. For others, what does it mean? And so businesses that are connected find it much easier to have these discussions and to really drive together. But one thing to be very cautious of, and I have to say that when I first read about this stuff in my GE days, and I'm going to share that in the 90s, and I'll share a little bit of what that was about in a minute or two, but it became kind of in vogue to talk about systems thinking around the turn of the century and into the early 2000s. And well, the problem then, of course, is you just end up with another tool. And actually, there was a whole bunch of strange behavior going on. There were people, systems thinking specialists who would be quite rude about other specialities, about Sigma or Lean or other things. There would be people kind of fighting over it, but actually in the end, they were describing another tool. And the problem I've found throughout my career is that if you are working in places that have absolutely set on one tool, whether that's Lean or Sigma or system thinking or whatever it is, or in the change world, ADKAR or Kotta or whatever it is, then that tool is kind of used to hit every possible thing they can. And whether it's a nail or not, they still try and hit it. So we have to think all the time about what is it we're trying to achieve here, and not forcing our thinking and forcing our tool into people's processes and into people's heads, but actually learning and developing. And one of the reasons I like system thinking in its pure sense is that it's very much about learning. My kind of early learnings were from a book called by Peter Singer. The details are at the bottom of the slide, called The Fifth Discipline, written in about 1990. And he talked about 5 things that come together: personal mastery, clarifying and deepening of our personal vision, focusing our energies and developing patience, and seeing reality objectively, mental models, unearthing deeply grained assumptions, generalizations, and you can see the rest of the words on there. And I have to say, by the way, in all of my experience of change, assumption busting and getting rid of the base assumptions has probably caused more change and moved us further along than almost anything else that I've used. Building a shared vision is massively important, of course, and practicing and unearthing shared pictures of the future. And a tool that I learned very early in my days in Lego was a thing called backward imaging, the ability to tell a story about what the future actually feels like, and the power of that story to help other people to commit, and to help other people mobilize, and to help other people get focused on the end goal. And of course, team learning, which starts with dialogue and the capacity of members of a team to suspend assumptions and enter into genuine thinking together. And the 5th, systems thinking, brings all those things together in a very powerful group to basically form a learning organization. There are some laws of the 5th discipline. I won't go through them all, but you will recognize many of them. Today's problems come from yesterday's solution. I particularly like. The harder you push, the harder the system pushes back. Newtonian, I guess, in its essence, but something we know. The cure can be worse than the disease, and of course we know that only too well in these rather desperate times. And number 10 I love, because the idea that dividing an elephant could produce 2 small elephants just makes me smile all the time. But you can understand how people think that way, and how that things start to fall about when you do think that way. And then, simply put, if you take the body corporate, so that's all of the mechanisms, all of the ways that the businesses work together, the processes, the systems, the organization, the suppliers, the customers, all of those things that make the body corporate have to work in sync with body corporal. And it's been great to hear people in this last few days talk about the importance of the human in all of this, because we all know, and if we didn't know before, we've certainly learnt it in these last weeks, that if we're not looking after the well-being, if we're not looking after our people, if we're not caring for them, then the body corporate cannot function. And of course, then you have a vision and a mission, which brings it all together. And in that middle piece, of course, is the system working at full power. And you can then start to work out why things are not working at full power, because you can see them very clearly in the way that they work and in the way that the business works. So although that's a very simple model, and you could argue it's not a model, it's a Venn diagram, of course it is, but that's kind of how it all comes together. And that may feel like nirvana, but I can tell you, in businesses like the Lego Group, that is exactly why you end up with a very, very powerful engine in the middle, because the people and everybody else together are working to get things right. You get so many indicators of that. I can tell you, in the first week that the lockdown was announced from our Billund headquarters, we didn't first get emails about making sure you're working and making sure what time you start or any of that sort of stuff. The first email I saw was from a very senior leader in the finance organization, reminding people that they have families to look after and that they should get that bit right before everything else. And it's those messages and it's that care that really bring the company together. And I think one of my absolute favorite sayings, and I think, as I get older and I'm getting much, much closer to retirement now, then I think if you understand this and you start to think about your job as a leader, particularly as you get older in an organization, and particularly as you learn more and you get more power, or you're given more power, then your job is to find the statue, the angels inside the stone. And Michelangelo, I think, had it so right when he talks about that. One of the big issues, of course, is that we see in this day and age lots of change. People say that change is the only constant, and we see lots and lots of change. The problem comes when, and the indicators of when things are not going brilliantly well, is when you see lots of change but very little improvement. And you see people fiddling around with things rather than understanding how it all works together. And another reason why that system thinking about that bringing it all together is so important to what we're trying to achieve. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you is our operational excellence journey for business services organization. And this is a set of stories, but it's also a very practical and very pragmatic approach to excellence and to improvement. And it doesn't just look at one or two areas, it looks at the full gamut of everything we do and who's involved, and that includes our systems, how they all work, how efficient we are, and all those other things. But at base level, it's a simple story. At the bottom of every mountain range, there's a large wet area, which is very, very hard to get out of. And actually, if you live in the swamp, you can't see the mountain generally. You don't even know it's there, because all you're trying to do is get out of it as soon as you possibly can, or at least be steady in there so no waves are drowning you whilst you're in there. But if you can clamber out of that, and if you set out on a journey, and let's change and say that's a journey to the summit of Everest, then you know that once you set out on the first part of that journey to base camp, as long as you've got the right equipment, as long as you've got the right clothing and a good guide, an expert guide, then generally, and you're in reasonable health, generally you can make it there. And it's not too hard to get there. It's tough, but it's doable, and many, many people do it. But things change when you get to base camp. When you get to base camp, you don't just then go up the mountain on your own. You acclimatize. You spend a fair amount of time at base camp learning new tools, new techniques, meeting new, more experienced, higher level guides, and using more sophisticated systems, whether that's a rope or a ladder, or whether that's the latest technology in climbing. And unless you're a world-class climber or a complete idiot, you don't go on your own. You then join hands with a group of people around you, or more metaphorically, tie yourself together to the group of people around you, and you go to the summit together. And by going together, you have the security of the people around you and all of the other things that you need in order to go to make this work. Now, if you change that to an operational excellence journey, in the swamp, you don't know who your customers are. You don't know what they want. You don't know what they need. You can't measure what you're doing. You're not sure whether your processes actually deliver to what the customer needs because you can't tell. And that's not a common place to be, but in some companies and in companies that I've been in, we have found departments and we have found groups of people who are well and truly in the swamp. They can't see the summit, they can't see the sun, let alone anything else around them. But that journey to base camp, and when you get to base camp, is the point of complete control. And complete control means that you do understand your customer. You do understand their needs. You also understand the needs and expectations of your suppliers, you know how your systems work and how they help you. You know how all of these things work together. And it's a crucial time in the journey of the mountain, because that point of control, which is a relatively easy place to get to, is a hard place to maintain. It needs discipline, and it needs discipline across all the facets of your business. It's no point being the greatest team in the world if everything else around you has gone to rats. So everything needs to work well. And of course, as you start to climb towards the summit, you need more sophisticated tools, whether that's Sigma or Design for Six Sigma or innovation, or all of those many other tools that you can use to find ways to improve and to move along. And it could well be full on Hoshin Kanri by the time you get to it, and strategy deployment. But you can only do that together, as I said. And in fact, the pull for it comes from the leaders of the business, from a very coordinated group, a very connected group of people who can help you on that journey. But it's by being able to tell these stories and by being able to talk about how it feels in each of the situations, which is how you get, how you have people around you absolutely buy in to what it is you're talking about, absolutely join the journey and have the fun that you can have in a journey like this, which doesn't necessarily have to be about deep tools and deep and complex things. Actually, it's fairly simple, but it's a lot of simple parts working together. A bit like the centipede. You need all of the 100 legs working together. You can't do it separately. So let me talk a little bit more about change. Kierkegaard, Danish philosopher, says that all perspective is individual, and yet we tend to say things like there is no I in team. Well, actually, teams are made up completely of I's, and people see things in different ways. And if you don't understand that, and if you don't understand that your colleagues in IT or your colleagues in finance or your colleagues in HR may come at things from completely different ways, both professionally and personally, then you don't understand how change happens and how change lands. And of course, all change is situational as well, because in a crisis, of course we can change. You know, the platform's on fire. We know how to make change happen in those environments. We find it much harder, of course, when you're in a winning team, when everything's going well. Then changing then is a very difficult thing to do, but it's situational, and you don't know the backgrounds to the people you're talking with. You don't know if they've got a sick child, if they've had a bad night, if they've fallen out with their spouse, if there are so many things going on, and yet we think if we apply a few tools, change will happen. But our journey does have to be consensual. We do all have to agree on the direction, which is why it works so well in a context like the Lego group, because we want to go where Lego wants to take us. We want to be part of that journey. We're very proud to be part of that journey. And because of that, change becomes easier. We, of course, don't all need to go at the same pace. And that's not possible often. You know, back to the scenario of the of asking for, you know, something new that can't happen for a few years. That doesn't mean you can't move forward. It just means you have to find different ways to do it. And it may mean that you have to do something, you know, in the worst case scenario, yet another Excel spreadsheet, but you can find ways to make that work. But if you understand the journey and you understand what the future looks like, that journey is so much easier, so much easier. So the goal is to build a learning organization, not group thinking. So this isn't about making clones. It's not about the Borg. This is about an ability to learn together. To, you know, previous speaker today talked about the importance of understanding the business, understanding the value streams. And if you do that in EA, in the same way as our finance partners or our HR partners these days, at least in my organization, do very strongly, then it makes it so much easier to work together, because you can have open conversations with open feedback and understanding of causal loops, of course. So in summary, build a picture of where you want to go. Connect your picture to the whole business. This isn't about IT, it's not about EA, it's not about finance or HR or business services or that. It's about the whole business. Find your compelling story. And by the way, tell it over and over and over again in the language of the business, not those million box process maps and system maps that nobody understands, but in the language of the business. Deliver on that story relentlessly. So keep the drive going and find ways to celebrate big and little victories, always keeping it real. That use of language, or in our world, sometimes we call tone of voice, is so important, because working together, you can make it work for everybody, because you're using a language that everybody can understand in the business. So keep it real. And that, Jose, is the end of my presentation. So I hand it back to you, I guess.
Peter, fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm gonna ask you, yeah, perfect, to stop sharing, and you have already. Terrific insights on the business and the culture behind effective enterprise architecture. And so I encourage the audience to keep typing your questions. I will get to as many as we can in the next few minutes that we have together here for our live Q&A. So type your questions, they come in, I get to see them, and I'll pass it on to Peter. So Peter, the very first question came from Michael King, and Michael asked, as you don't seem, you know, I think he's referring to your initial comments on the black hole and the Death Star. So as you don't seem to like the overall model, big picture of the enterprise architecture management team, which deliverables from a personal point of view would you like to receive from your enterprise architects? And what do you need from the enterprise architects to get your work done in the business?
So first off, I love my enterprise architect, by the way. And I even know his name, and it's not Dave. So that's a good starting point. Quite simply put, what I ask for is for somebody to interact with who actually does really understand the business. I know that's a lot to ask in some cases, but understands the business in a way that says, I know how my systems help you do what you need us to do. I know how by changing those, by modernizing them, by automating, by whatever it means it is, that there are opportunities to improve with that. And I can bring to you ideas and solutions, not casting concrete solutions, but ideas that will turn into solutions that you can work on together. And when that really works well, when you're having open, positive conversations, about the outcomes that you're trying to achieve for the business, and that those outcomes are aligned, then it becomes a very, very easy conversation. It doesn't mean I get everything I want to get immediately when I want it. Of course, it doesn't mean that. But it means that we have an understanding of the future and where it is we're trying to go, and how then we can work together to achieve that. Whether that's in a change to architecture, whether that's in something funky that we can do that makes it different, but we can make it work together, and we can make it work together much quicker because we understand the why of what we're trying to achieve. So the first thing I ask for is time to understand, and that goes both ways. It's not just you understand me, Mr. EA or Mrs. EA, but actually help me understand you. Help me understand where you're at. Help me understand the constraints that we're working under. And then let's work together to get to the best possible solution we can get to as fast as the budget and everything else will allow us to do. So that's where I'm kind of looking.
Very good, very good.
Does that make sense? I hope
Yeah.
that answers the question.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Peter, this is a common question that has come up with of course, the pandemic and the impact that it has in so many different businesses. How has it impacted the business at Lego, and and specifically, how has it impacted its strategies and digital strategies moving forward?
Well, I think first off, I kind of talked a little bit about some of the attitudes. So when these things happen, and it has been a very severe change in course in terms of the way we thought business was going to run, then first off, we have got it right from a people point of view, and that was our early focus, was to make sure we got it right from our people point of view. As it happens, Lego has been often the purchase of choice for parents and for adults looking for things for their children and for things to do. So we've actually had a pretty strong period in many ways as a business, in a time when all of our people, and particularly all the people in my part of the organization, have been working from home. And we're thinking about now what our business models for the future are going to look like. In the past, we said, yeah, you can work from home, but mostly you must be in the office. Now in the new world, who knows whether that will change or not, but you could see a world in the future which is that this job is from home and please come to the office once a month and for your team. You could see things changing. And we embraced, of course, that very quickly. We made some changes to the way we communicate. We're much bigger users of Teams and that sort of thing now. We use it for a whole bunch of things. In my own team, we have a team page called Working From Home But Not Alone, where we share fun, and we have a whole range of stuff that we do together. So socially, as well as from a business point of view. And from an IT point of view, well, of course, the guys have done an amazing job for keeping everything running. But at the same time, we're in some fairly meaty programs right now in terms of the future technology roadmap, how that's going to work. We've all worked together on that remotely. We haven't had to be in the office to do it. We've had some great discussions, very robust discussions. I've seen the inside of living rooms for people I'd hardly even met, let alone anything else, and it's worked. So for us, I think it's shown what a strong business we are. We've supported the business very, very, very well across a whole range of different things, and our people, of course, most importantly. And we've blown a few forecasts, so that's going to be interesting. So we're already in the busy time of year when normally that would be a little bit later. So we've had to change some of our models and some of our working in some quite difficult circumstances.
Very good, very good. I have to make a comment here that for those of you who are in attendance, next week we have the entire conference next week will be focused on this topic of digital transformation workplace. And so I know that those who are attending today, you saw the announcement through the chat on how to register for that. So this is something that's impacted, of course, all businesses right now, and Peter's experiences are very much aligned with what we have observed in a lot of different business. So that's really interesting. Peter, Jeb McIntyre, he made a comment adding on to the subject that you're just talking about with respect to the to this connection between the enterprise architecture leaders and the business. He makes a commentary that there's a lot of distance between conceptual and implementation.
Yes.
And I think you have alluded to this already on your previous answer, but I just want to make sure, you know, give me a bit more of a tactical best practice on closing the gap between enterprise architecture and the business side. What have you seen? What kind of mechanisms do you use at Lego that on your work, on the way you do work, to have that closer tight connection with the teams, with the business teams and the enterprise architecture teams?
I guess put simply, we talk a lot. So it doesn't seem to matter where you are in the organization. You can talk to your EA guys. You can talk to a whole range. You can talk to Niels B if you want to, but and you will get an answer. So that's a starting point. We're an organization that listens to each other. That's a good starting point. Now, clearly, there's a point in time where you have to say, no, this is where we're going, and this is the plan, and this is when it will happen, and this is how it will do, and we have to solidify all that. But we're in a process at the moment where we're having these discussions about the future over the next 3, 5, 10 years and what that's going to look like. And during that period, there are a couple of things that I think are very, very important here. One is, as somebody much brighter than I once said, first seek to understand and then be understood. And I think our EA guys and I think our digital guys have done an amazing job of that first piece, that to really understand what the drivers are. So not just tell me what hardware and software you need, but tell me about what it is you're trying to achieve here. What is the purpose that you're trying to get to? And by understanding that, then that alignment becomes much easier. We know in my world, as an example, we at the moment we have a kind of we know we want to be more automated. We want to be a bit more efficient. We want to be able to do more so that Lego can continue to grow. We want to support that. We don't know exactly what that looks like right now, but we have an idea of what it could look like, and we have an idea of what that will bring to the business. And by articulating that well, we can then get to the point where people will say, okay, that seems worth putting into the plan. Let's put that into the plan now. Now let's look at the art of the possible and start the discussions about what that future will really look like from a technological point of view. And it's that journey that we've been on and are on at the moment, which is for us, for me, I think is working incredibly well. And of all the times in my working career where I've been involved in processes like this feels the most rugged in many ways, in that we're having an open discussion about the future of the business and how technology is going to support that future. And it's not just about the IT, and it's not just about productivity, but it's also about the people experience. How do you energize everybody every day? How do you make sure that we build all that into the journey that we're trying to achieve? What tone of voice should we use? All of those things working together. So my view, by the way, I think over a long period of time now, most people in business will have an HR business partner, will have a finance business partner. And if you're in an enlightened world, they're also part of your LTs, and they join in and everything. That almost never happens in IT. And I think the business could do a much better job of understanding than it does. It's very easy sometimes to sit here and say, well, you know, if the architecture was better, if the systems were better, you know, we could do anything. But actually, we have to take ownership from that. And if we really understand system thinking and how it all pulls together, there's a big onus on the business as well to work with our EA guys, to pull them into the discussion and to make sure that we understand them in the same way as most of us now understand the balance sheet, know which side's credit and debit, and can do net present value. if we had to, right? A while back that never happened, but it does now because the world has changed. Similarly in HR, the world has changed, and it needs, I think, in IT, the business to be much clearer and able to articulate in a much stronger way and be more powerful around what it expects.
Peter, that's a great message, a great way of wrapping up this segment. We really appreciate you coming, taking your time and joining us today, sharing your expertise through decades and how you apply that at your work today. Thank you very much.
Jose, you're welcome. Thank you very much. It's been a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate everybody who's sending questions. I couldn't get to all of them, but we'll continue the conversation on LinkedIn. We'll have our last session today at the top of the hour, and I will be presenting that session for you. And on that session, we're going to talk about intelligent business process management, which is an enterprise architecture approach looking at business process management end-to-end in the organization. And most important, I want to give you some fundamentals, not only on best practices, but also share with you some real life applications on how that's done. It's really not just me, but the experiences of over 30,000 excellence and innovation leaders across more than 100 organizations across all industries. And specifically, I'm going to focus on the journey of an energy organization that in a period of 8 years increased its market value from $2 billion to $36 billion. Real value, not fuzzy stuff, real market value. And I'm going to show you how it's done from the inside out. So for those of you who are going to be here with me at the top of the hour, look forward to that. Look forward to your questions, and we're going to get deeper into the subject on how we build value creation with enterprise architecture and specifically with intelligent business process management. So looking forward to that, looking forward to meeting you again at the top of the hour, and we'll see you soon.